Hey guys, welcome to DIY guitar making. Today what I'm doing here in the shop is I'm joining some Sitka Spruce tops that I have here, some book matched pairs. I'm joining them on my various joining boards that you'll see here in a little bit. These are tops that are being joined and prepared for the guitar building workshops which are starting in spring. Now all of my spring workshops are booked out. There are still spots available for the fall workshops for 2022. So if you want to get in on a workshop, those are still available, but spring is not. So that's what I'm working on today in the shop, joining. I've already jointed these pairs, meaning cut this joint between, here, let me unfold this for you, between the two book match pairs. And you know what, I'll talk a little bit about that, about getting that joint right on the shooting board. Just a little bit, but mostly I'm going to be giving a demonstration of how we use the joining board to glue up these pairs. Okay, but before we get to that, let's do your questions. So, the first question that I have comes from David Royce, and this question is, what are the advantages or disadvantages of attaching the bridge and neck prior to finishing? I'm just about to finish using True Oil. Great, love True Oil. But was planning to mask off the bridge area and neck area to allow a clean finish, and then attach both once the body and bolt-on neck are finished. Any thoughts on this? Yes, so most people by far do exactly what you're talking about. They finish the neck and the body separately and with the bridge unattached, so then the bridge gets glued on later. That way you are dealing with clear, flat surfaces. When I say clear, I mean unobstructed. You don't have, the bridge in your way, creating these little inside corners. The real enemy of finishing is corners. Any kind of inside corners or things like that, you have that at the fretboard tongue, you have that all around the bridge, and you have it around the heel. These are difficult areas to finish well, but it's not impossible. So I'm biased here towards finishing after everything's attached, just because I've always done it that way. And I've learned how to finish around the bridge and into those inside corners. It's very difficult. If you're new to this stuff and you want to reduce the learning curve, I don't recommend necessarily doing it that way, but it is a way to do it. It's just difficult to get into those corners. And by the way, I should mention, you are then sort of pigeonholed into using hand-rubbed finishes. You can't really deal with inside corners with a spray finish. So that's gonna put a lot of you people into the camp of finishing the neck and the body separately and then attaching them. So I use, and you're talking about using True Oil as a finish, so you're doing a hand rub finish. So you can actually attach everything up and then rub the finish on. The advantage to that is with everything attached, you don't have to worry about marring your finish by through all the work that you're doing after you attach those parts. The way that I build guitars, and everybody has a different process, but the way I build guitars, it involves a lot of work, and even heavy work, even heavy sanding, after the neck and the body are attached. For example, the fretboard is unradiused and even needs to be leveled a little bit after I attach it. So doing that radiusing work with a nice pristine finish on there is, it's possible, but it's not desirable for me. So and because I like hand rubbed finishes, it's an easy go-to for me to do it all attached. I also finish over the top of the bridge too, so that makes it a little easier. I don't have to mask off the bridge or anything like that. I just mask off the fretboard face, and then everything else receives a hand rubbed finish. But again, just want to stress the point, finishing in inside corners is extremely difficult. So if you think you want to do it that way, just know what you're getting into, and practice a lot on anything that has an inside corner to work on that technique. Okay? Next question comes from Walter Ryder. Let's see, he writes, why would you not pour fill, and do you pour fill the tops? Okay, so there's kind of two questions there, and he was asking this because I had mentioned on the current guitar that I'm building, number 85, that I'm not pour filling that guitar, and actually I do this quite frequently. And right off the bat, I want to mention that not pour filling is really an option for oil finishes. If you're doing any kind of evaporative finish, basically the type of finish that builds. So there's penetrating finishes that penetrate down into the wood surface, and there's finishes that build on top of the wood surface. The building finishes are your evaporative finishes. So nitrocellulose lacquer, shellac would be another one. Those, because they build up on top of the surface rather than penetrating into it, if you leave all those pores wide open, then that finish can and will sink back into those pores and create these pretty awful kind of pockmarked areas. Also, because it's building up over those pores, you can even get like trapped air bubbles and things like that, where, you know, air gets trapped in the pore, and then you finish over and you build that finish on top, and now you have this visible air bubble that mars an otherwise awesome finish. So keep in mind as I'm saying this, that this is really not pour filling, is really more of an option, or only an option, for oil, or not just oil, but penetrating finishes. Oil is just the most common, oil type finishes are the most common penetrating finishes. So rather than building up on the surface, these finishes basically build down into the surface. So there's no film thickness sitting on top. And in that way, it really becomes an aesthetic choice. You can actually choose not to pour fill. Of course, then you will see the pores. So we won't be able to get this piano-like gloss finish that you see on factory instruments and that a lot of people are after. But you can still get an absolutely gorgeous finish, and in some ways, depending on your own taste, it can be a more beautiful finish than a finish where you've actually filled the pores. And that's because it looks more like real wood when you show the pores, right? When you have the thing fully encased in a hard candy shell, there's a sort of fakeness about it. I'm not knocking, you know, pour filled guitars or, you know, lacquer finished guitars or anything like that, but that's just, you know, when you see a real well done oil finished guitar, you'll know what I mean. There's like a vintage kind of authentic look and feel to the instrument, even a cool smell to it that just has a different aesthetic. So it's an aesthetic choice, but again, only if for those penetrating finishes. I wouldn't just do this on a sprayed lacquer finish or something like that, because it will look awful. Okay, I think that's enough on pour filling. He had some other question there though. Oh, and do you pour fill tops? So generally, tops are generally close poured, unless you do like a mahogany top. So it depends on what wood you use, but soft woods don't have pores. So you don't, pour filling is pointless. You know, if your wood has pores, yeah, you would, if I was pour filling and the top had pores, like a mahogany top wood, I would pour fill. But most woods, the Sitka Spruce that we'll be working with here in a moment, you don't need to pour fill because there's simply nothing to pour fill. There's no pores. So you can always just if you, when in doubt, you know, get on the internet and you can figure out, you can Google around and figure out if the wood species that you're using is either porous, semi-porous, which means it has some pores but not really many, or non-porous. If it's non-porous, easy answer there, no pore filler. Okay, next question. Hi Eric, do you use 18 or 25 millimeter thick MDF for the mold? So I used, well, let me back up. This is from the last video where I did a demo on making guitar molds, and I just used 3/4 inch thick MDF, which you can get from just any old hardware store, Lowe's, Home Depot, all that's fine. Even better if you use project plywood, like high quality, you know, like the kind of plywood that has many layers of ply that you would get from like Rockler or Woodcraft or something like that. That's even better, but MDF works pretty great for molds and stuff too. Millimeters, 25 millimeters is pretty close to 1 inch. So if, you know, converting, I'm not sure what 3/4 inch would be in millimeters, but it's probably pretty close to 18. Sounds like it. So yeah, 18 millimeters. Last question here. Okay, Tim and Carrie asked, what is that heater? Stratus column shape. How does it work? What powers it? So what he's talking about is what you guys have probably seen in many of my videos. I'm actually going to grab the camera here to show you guys. And that is not a heater. Kind of looks like a heater. I understand why you might think that. But this is an air filtration device. So you can see the filter in here. It's just a totally different way of doing air filtration. Over here in the corner, I have a more conventional air filter. It should be hung up on the ceiling, but I haven't gotten around to it. So it's kind of on this stand here. But this is what you normally see for an air filtration device, and it's fixed on the ceiling somewhere in your shop. This is what Stratus calls a point of source air filtration device, because you can grab it and drag it to wherever you're working at the time, and it draws the dust down away from your nose and mouth where you might breathe it in, rather than having an air filtration device that's up on the ceiling where it actually draws it sort of up past your face. So I think it's been great for me. I've really enjoyed using it. A student recommended it to me at one time, and I bought it, and I love it. It's great, again, for those point of source. You know, when I'm doing a lot of hand sanding in a particular corner of the shop, I can just drag this so it's sitting right next to me, picking up all that dust that would otherwise kind of be all around my environment. All right, so not a heater, but a cool air filtration device. So, transitioning now to what we're going to work on. Let me see if you can see everything all right. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Okay, so what I have here is, you know what, let's pause this. I'm going to pause and come right back. Okay guys, so what you see here is my joining board with one of my book matched pairs of that Sitka Spruce for the spring workshops. That's Picea sitchensis for you guys who are into, you know, geeky Latin names for wood. So Sitka Spruce, and I have this glued up in the joining board with weight on top. And in a minute here, we're going to remove this fence, take the weight off, and then we can glue up another piece in here. What you don't see off to the side is I actually have two more joining boards where I've attached two other book matched pairs. So I like to, joining boards are easy to make, so you can make a couple of them, and that way you can be more efficient in your shop and batch out a couple of tops all at once. So why don't we first just talk a little bit how we got to this point in the first place. So like I mentioned, the first thing I had to do was cut this joint between my two pieces and get that absolutely perfect. Let me show you a little bit of my jointing setup over here in the corner where my shooting board is. Okay, so right here I've got my shooting board. It's a little bit extra long just because I like it that way. I like to have a little clamp, a little toggle clamp on the top. It just makes it that much easier to place my two pieces. My book matched pair would go one piece stacked over top of the other on the edge like this, and then you can, let me remove this shim board here. You can clamp it in there, which I'm not going to do right now, and take your number 5 jack plane and cut a nice edge there. I not only use the number 5 jack plane, but I also use a leveling beam. So this is just a flat beam with 220 grit sandpaper on it. So between using the number 5 jack plane and this beam, I can hone in on a nice, perfect joint every time. It's not hard to do. I can do them, knock them out pretty quickly too. And then right here, this thing is my light box. So you could also just hold your two pieces up to a bright window, but it's a little easier for me. And not to mention, sometimes I'm working at night here where you don't have daylight. I can just check this on here. And what you should be able to see when you push these together is no gap at all. The only reason you're seeing a gap right now is because of the tape that I have between them. But well, here, I'll go ahead and show you. The tape's coming off in the moment anyway. So you keep working it with the plane and that flat beam like I talked about on the shooting board until you can get no daylight on the light box. So I don't know how well you can see that over there, but you should be able to move your head from side to side like this and not see any daylight between the two pieces. And even better, what I like to do is you can waffle these back and forth, and you can actually feel, you can do it in a couple different places, and you can feel the friction between those two pieces. If you don't feel that friction, then this could benefit from a little more time spent, a little more effort on the shooting board here. Alright, so, then last thing I want to mention is once I get this good, you then take these two pieces, put them back together like this. I put my two pieces of tape on there, which you just saw, and that's just to hold the pieces together while I cut on the bandsaw an angled line like you see here. The reason I do that is so that now when I fold this open, I should have this whole thing should be sort of in a wedge shape, right? Like a trapezoid. I think that's what a trapezoid is like, if I know my shapes. So you put your book matched pairs into a wedge shape, and that then brings us to our joining board. So let's get back over there. Alright, so this has sat for at least 45 minutes. Really, this has sat like this for probably 2 hours at this point, so plenty of time for that glue to set. A mistake would be to take this weight off right away because there's so much tension between the fence and this fixed fence here. It's a lot of tension that this will kind of buckle upward, and that's just not good. So it's better to take the tension off by removing this fence so it doesn't buckle upward. And now once this fence is off, then you can take the weight off. By the way, these are just old side bending molds that I use in my side bending machine. They make good weights. And just for overkill, I throw some extra weights on top of them. Alright, so here's my piece. The only reason I took a strip of this off to use as a cleat for something. So that's why we're missing a piece there. But you can see, nice beautiful joint there. So this will get stickered and stored elsewhere. Alright, let's go ahead and join the next piece. So, like I mentioned before, we've cut these edges to give ourselves a taper, a wedge shape to it. And the first thing I'm going to do is just place the two pieces in there like that, place my fence there, and we're going to clamp the fence in place. And I like to use C-clamps for this just because when we wedge this inward, we're going to be putting a good amount of pressure against the fence, and C-clamps really provide that strong down pressure to hold it in place. You don't want to use something lighter like a spring clamp or something like that, which could actually move. Alright, so there's our fence. Now we can pop this out just by kind of this is really stuck in there. Tapping it back like that. Pop it out and pull it up on its side like this. And then I'm going to take a spring clamp. And I like to use a spring clamp just to hold it together while I spread the glue. Spring clamp in this case is kind of like having an extra hand. You don't need it though, you could just hold this and run the glue and then spread it. But I like to have the extra hand there. Okay, let's spread our glue. And then spread it with my pinky. Take our two pieces and place them in there. And then just wedge it forward like this. Okay, and what we're going to do is we're actually going to tap this into place to really get that wedging action. But before I tap, because if I tap now, it'll just kind of buckle upward. Now is the time that we put our weight on. And when I put the weight on, I always like to cover as much area as possible, but I don't want to cover the joint itself because afterwards I'm going to go in with a stick and clean up some of that extra glue squeeze out. Alright, a little extra weight there just to be sure. And let's tap it. So you could just use a hammer in the block to tap it just like this. When you tap it, make sure the block spans across both of the pieces so that it'll move both pieces at the same time. You don't want to just hit on one side because you'll offset the pieces. You'll slide one piece forward and then your book match won't match as well. Does not need much. That is plenty right there. You can overdo this. A little bit of wedging action actually creates a lot of pressure. So plenty for gluing purposes. Alright, I'm going to use my little ebony offcuts from the fretboard here that I save and sharpen as a glue stick. and clean this up. Whenever I clean glue squeeze out, I like to just pick up little bits at a time like you see me doing here, rather than running the stick across, which just kind of smears it everywhere. Alright, so that's it. This is a very simple, very ancient method of joining book-matched pairs. It really doesn't require much. It just requires you to have a sheet of plywood or MDF or whatever. You have your base here. You screw down a fixed fence, so this fence doesn't move, onto one side. And then you have your adjustable fence on this side, which is really just a extra piece of wood that I keep around and clamp in place to match that wedge shape that we cut into our pieces. And after that, you're just adding weight and just tapping that wedge shaped book matched pair into place. Okay. Well, that is your demonstration for today. I hope you guys learned something from that, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye. If you learned something here, please give this video a like and subscribe so you can be notified when I release a new DIY guitar making video. And if you want to really learn more, take one of my structured online courses at ericschaferguitars.com or register for a hands-on guitar building workshop here with me in Burnville, Pennsylvania.